This is the In Focus podcast from The Hindu.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the In Focus podcast. I'm your host, G. Sampath. In the 2024 Lok Sabha elections in Maharashtra, the Maha Vikas Aghadi or the MVA won 30 out of the 48 Lok Sabha seats, while the Maha Yuti could get only 17. But in the just concluded assembly elections, the Maha Yuti won a landslide with 235 out of the 288 seats. The Mahayuti alliance's main constituent, the BJP alone, won 132 seats, while the other two, the Ajit Pawar-led NCP and the Eknath Shinde-led Shiv Sena, garnered 41 and 57 seats respectively. None of the MVA parties could win enough seats to even qualify for the position of leader of the opposition, the first time this has happened in 6 decades. The Shiv Sena Uddhav Bal Thackeray faction got 20 seats, the Congress won 16, and the NCP Sharad Chandra Pawar won 10 seats respectively. So what has changed so dramatically in a matter of 5 months from June 2024 to November 2024 that almost the entire state has apparently chosen to throw its weight behind the Mahayuti? It seems like there was a Mahayuti wave, but a wave by definition is so pronounced that it cannot be missed, and yet hardly any political observer had an inkling of a Mahayuti wave until the counting was done. So what explains this outcome? How serious are opposition complaints citing a post 5 pm voter surge, something which has also been flagged by former CEC S.Y. Qureshi? And what are the factors at play as the victors sit down to figure out government formation? We discuss all these questions around the Maharashtra political scenario in this detail in this episode of In Focus, and we have with us Vinaya Deshpande, the Hindu's Maharashtra Chief of Bureau. Vinaya, welcome to In Focus. Thank you so much for joining us. So Vinaya, to start with, can you tell us what was the general, quote-unquote consensus band that most political observers had probably had in their minds when vote shares and seat shares were talked about before the elections, for Mahayuti and MVA and most of these parties which compose these alliances? Did the actual results which we have today fall within that broad band of expected vote and seat tallies?
Interesting is the results did not fall into the expected band as you're talking about. It was an unexpected result for several political analysts, for journalists as well. And while the Mahayuti had kept claiming that they will get 175 plus seats in Maharashtra, they had themselves not anticipated this kind of a landslide victory. Having said that, though the anticipation was that the Mahayuti as well as the Mahavikas Aghadi will possibly be in a close neck fight with each other, both the alliances might get an almost equal number of shares, and that it would likely be the independents and the rebels who will become the kingmakers in deciding who forms the government in Maharashtra. What was interesting was that the analysis that this was not one general state election which had a statewide issue, statewide narrative, statewide campaign, but this was a hyper local election. So, as one of the political analysts had put it, Maharashtra, which is the second largest state after Uttar Pradesh and has 288 Maharashtra State Assembly seats, there were 288 elections that were fought in Maharashtra. The secret of the success of Mahayuti lies in the fact that they had recognized it well in advance. They fine-tuned their understanding and cooperation within the alliance, and they also looked at that local election by treating it that way, by bringing out different manifestos that catered to the local population. So, for example, an NCP Ajit Pawar group, which had performed, terribly in the Lok Sabha election, had won just one seat, has got over 40 seats now in the state assembly election, despite the fact that Sharad Pawar had campaigned quite aggressively against Ajit Pawar's faction at a time when there was legacy battle. The simple technique or tactic that they used was to bring out local manifestos. So initially they were thinking they will fight on 60 assembly seats, political analysts who helped, political strategists who had helped that party tell me that they had worked on 60 different manifestos in order to cater to that local regional population.
What kind of things, what kind of issues, what does these 60 different local manifestos say? Has anybody seen these local manifestos? What do they talk about?
Yes, for example, when I traveled to Baramati, and Baramati was one of the most closely watched fights in nationally, because this was the first time when, for the state election, a Pawar was fighting against a Pawar, Ajit Pawar, who was Maharashtra's deputy chief minister, was fighting for his eighth consecutive term against his own nephew, Yogendra Pawar, who was fielded by Sharad Pawar. And when we were traveling in Baramati, we were shown manifestos not just for Baramati city and Baramati rural, but also for various groups of villages, where it talked about, the kind of funds that were spent in that area for the kind of work that was done. So in Baramati, it was done at various levels. It was done for communities as well. So I saw a manifesto that was brought out for the Muslims, because there was, this talk of batenge to katenge, and Ajit Pawar is in alliance with the BJP. That narrative was hurting his vote bank. So in fact, that party went ahead to bring about a manifesto for the Muslims, showing the kind of development work that was done for the community, the way funds were poured into building masjids, or community activities were facilitated through the development funds that the MLA got, that the deputy chief minister got, and how they would continue to do, what was the vision for the community. Such manifestos were brought out for sub-regional levels within the constituency as well. And that, is what the political strategists after the election now tell us, that seems to have worked. While this was one factor, the other factor was also the fact that the Maha Vikas Aghadi started on a much better ground. They had the Lok Sabha elections results with them. They still thought that they had the wave of sympathy going for both Uddhav Thackeray as well as Sharad Pawar, where their party symbols were taken away from them. In fact, Uddhav Thackeray famously kept talking about how his father's legacy was also claimed by Eknath Shinde. Against this, the narrative that the Mahayuti tried to give was to talk about development and the work they did. While the Mahayuti claims that the Majhi Ladki Bahin Yojana was the decisive factor in turning the tide around, because it was used as a blackmailing factor as well. While women did get 5 installments, 7,500 rupees in their accounts for Diwali, which turned out to be a massive amount for the lower income groups, there was also a veiled threat saying, if this government doesn't come back to power, that money is going to stop and you will not get that money. For the initial period, the Mahavikas Aghadi could not come out with a narrative to counter that. Initially, they criticized the Mahayuti government over this, saying that this was the bribe that they were giving to women. Later, they said they will give 3,000 rupees, as in contrast to the 1,500 that were being given already. By that time, the Mahayuti was able to set a narrative saying, if this government doesn't come back in power, this money will stop. So there are
But
several levels.
isn't there already some bureaucrat who has been saying this is going to really cost too much and we may have to scale it down, reduce the amount. It's not going to be sustainable over a period of the entire term, right?
Forget the bureaucrats. When this was floated, the finance department itself had raised red flags over this. Now, though Ajit Pawar, who's the finance minister of Maharashtra, has said on record that they will make financial allocations so that the 1,500 rupees are distributed on a timely basis even after the election. The bigger problem for the Mahayuti now is that they had promised that if they come back to power, they will increase that fund to 2,100. So each eligible woman in Maharashtra will now get not 1,500 but 2,100. And no one has one clue about how that 2,100 to each woman is going to be, how it's going to reflect on the state treasury, really, because the 1,500 load in itself was quite difficult to handle. unless the center helps in some way to bridge that gap, this is going to be a massive issue that the Mahayuti will face in the coming few days as soon as they take charge of the government, is the way I look at it.
Right. Thank you for this detailed sort of explanation, Vinay. I mean, it's a good point that it was a hyper-local election, and as you said, there were 288 elections, but there were also at one level a kind of a statewide discourse around this entire theme, which the MVA raised, of big employment-bearing projects being transferred out of Maharashtra, to Gujarat. Did this issue not have any resonance with the electorate?
Well, that seems to be the most interesting part of it all because you saw that employment among youth or agricultural distress were not really the issues that seem to have made any dent on the ruling government. So, we had published articles by Lokniti and CSDS, which had analyzed these state results because that was extremely confounding. And one of the things that they said with respect to these issues was that though these issues were there, what seems to have worked in favor of Mahayuti was that people on a broader basis chose the leadership of Narendra Modi at the national level, and that is why, in congruence to that, they chose the Mahayuti in the state. And secondly, what they said was, something to the effect of how this the whole narrative around communal lines, "Ek hai to safe hai," worked way more than anticipated in order to consolidate the Hindu vote. And that seems to be the plausible explanation, really, because we still do not understand how, for example, just a week before the election, and this is again very interesting, when the election campaigning started, when each party gave out different manifestos, and you saw that six different parties were in the fray. We did not see a fight which was Mahayuti versus Mahavikas Aghadi in Maharashtra. We saw each party fighting one another. So it was ostensibly the BJP against the Congress, the NCP Ajit Pawar group against the NCP Sharad Pawar group, and the Shiv Sena Uddhav Thackeray group against the Shiv Sena Eknath Shinde group. In this fight, each party brought its own different manifesto. And in none of the manifestos did you see the issue of cotton, the issue of soybean farmers being raised in the beginning. It was only, a week before the elections that Rahul Gandhi raised this issue when the Congress leadership was touring Marathwada and Vidarbha, where there was immense distress with respect to soybean and cotton MSP, and that had not reflected anywhere else. So the minute Mallikarjun Kharge said that Congress will give 7,000 rupees MSP for soybean, is when the Prime Minister himself intervened in the issue, announced certain SOPs for the soybean farmers, and that narrative was again changed. So it's interesting that neither the issue of youth unemployment, the issue of agricultural distress, seems to have reflected in the voting pattern. When the Prime Minister held his only rally in Mumbai, it sounded disjointed because he kept talking about "Ek hai to safe hai," and all of us journalists who were attending this rallies were talking to each other, saying that at a time when the Congress is raising farmers' issues, when it's saying that jobs are not there because big industries have been taken away from Maharashtra, why is it that the BJP is playing around "batenge to katenge, ek hai to safe hai"? That did not seem like it made sense. On the other hand, they claimed that they brought development, they brought infrastructure projects. They claimed that Maharashtra was number one when it came to the foreign direct investment, and that so many industries were coming and setting in plants in the state as well. So that seems to be a gray area where the issues seem to be raised by the MVA from time and again. It seemed like those issues were pertinent, and yet when the voting took place, the Lokniti CSDS survey says that the communal polarization did help the BJP in getting votes. Also, the higher voting percentage which Maharashtra saw this time, the Mahayuti claims that maximum of that higher voter percentage went, the the voters chose the Mahayuti over the Mahavikas Aghadi.
Right. No, you spoke about this, this entire the dynamic of the contest, where it's not just MVA versus Mahayuti, but it's like three parties picking, three parties from the other side. It's more like a Davis Cup match. Each one is playing against their counterpart in the other team. So where these alliances, MVA, for instance, Congress and Uddhav's party and Sharad Pawar, was this merely a seat sharing arrangement kind of an alliance, or was there also some kind of a political ideological alliance that approached the voter with a singular plank? Because there was clearly some kind of an ideological coherence, maybe not as much as one would have liked, they would have liked, but there was more of an ideological coherence, I think, with the Mahayuti, which was dominated, I guess, by the Hindutva plank, because they had a slogan of, Ek hai to safe hai and all that. I don't see if MVA had a kind of a coherent political plank, or were they merely seat sharing arrangements? How do you see that?
What we saw this time, especially with respect to the MVA, was the inability to get their act together. As much as they fought more coherently and more cohesively during the Lok Sabha elections, we found that that kind of coordination was not as much during the state assembly elections. It started off well, and initially the MVA, as I said earlier, was on a much better footing than the Mahayuti when it came to differences. But the Mahayuti was quick to address those differences, crack the whip, threaten the party workers as well at times to say that if they do not fall in line, then there will be consequences. That kind of immediate action was not seen, primarily because the top leadership of each party seemed to be upset. In the beginning itself, Uddhav Thackeray made that trip to Delhi. He wanted the India Bloc or the Mahavikas Aghadi alliance partners, ostensibly the Congress, to back him for the chief minister's place in Maharashtra. When he tried to downplay that difference, he came to a bargaining position where he said, declare any phase, but declare a phase under whose leadership this election will be fought. Both Sharad Pawar as well as the Congress were reluctant to do that, and that reluctance was seen throughout the campaign. That of Uddhav Thackeray, who set out pretty much on his own. We have come to a position now where his party workers and party leaders are now requesting him to break away from the Mahavikas Aghadi. He fought on seats which were fewer than the Congress, but today he is the single largest opposition party in Maharashtra. So the Congress fought on 103 seats, won merely 16. The political debacle one cannot even discuss about, because every time we think that the Congress has done its worst, I think the next election brings in a shocker in some sense. So, the Congress this time got 16 after fighting on 103. The Shiv Sena UPT fought on 85 or 86 seats and 120. And the worst was, Sharad Pawar, because Sharad Pawar had upped the expectations after Lok Sabha. His strike rate in Lok Sabha was, nothing short of impressive. He fought on 10 seats, won 8 of those 10 seats, a strike rate of 80%. This time on, though, we did not see that performance, primarily because we see that the NCP has always traditionally been a loosely bounded kind of a conglomeration of regional satraps who would get voted on their own power anyway. And, the way it's talked about in Maharashtra politics is the biggest skill that Sharad Pawar brought to the table was to bring all these regional satraps together under his leadership. So these regional satraps went and backed Ajit Pawar, and they seem to have proven their might this time on, where despite the fact that Sharad Pawar rallied very strongly in their constituencies, asking people to defeat them, most of these MLAs were able to retain their seats. So we saw that there was this disjointed kind of rallying and campaigning that took place, where each party was on its own, And while it was true for both Mahayuti as well as Mahavikas Aghadi, the Mahayuti kept in mind certain to-do things and certain no-go areas. For example, where Ajit Pawar realized that having a Hindutva face will dent his candidate. The Mahayuti respected that, and any of the Hindutva leaders did not campaign or hold rallies in those constituencies, so that the vote transfer could be safer, and that each party could benefit along with each other. This was a learning from Lok Sabha, because in Lok Sabha the vote sharing had not happened. In contrast, the Mahavikas Aghadi could not work out on these regional differences, primarily because it was
Like, can you give an example of where the Mahavikas Aghadi didn't stick to the kind of discipline? Like for example, if for somebody from the Mahayuti to go and give a Hindutva speech in an Ajit Pawar constituency would have been a blunder. Was there similar kind of a blunder made by any of the constituents of the MVA? Because I was just thinking in this context, the whole caste census issue which was raised, I think, in the earlier part of the campaign by the Congress. I think Rahul Gandhi spoke about it. Did it perhaps rub any section of their vote base the wrong way, or are there any other examples like this that come to mind? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I can give you two examples that I can think of immediately. One is with respect to the narrative around no money that did not work out well for the Mahavikas Aghadi, and that further brought Uddhav Thackeray into trouble, because the Mahayuti was quick to set a narrative that was Sajjad Nomani, uh, who had given a demand letter of 17 demands, which included some objectionable demands with respect to the interests of the Hindus. And that is why Uddhav Thackeray had completely been sold out of, did not stick to the Hindutva agenda. That narrative, that Sajjad Nomani narrative, the Mahavikas Aghadi could not counter, Uddhav Thackeray could not counter. That was one clear example that went against them during the last leg of campaigning, which was quite decisive. And secondly, this happened during the seat sharing talks, and this was that there were tremendous differences between the Uddhav Thackeray group, Shiv Sena, and the Congress with respect to seat distribution, particularly in Vidarbha, where the Congress thought it had a strong hold, and Uddhav Thackeray still wrestled 8 more seats from the Congress against the Congress leadership's will, because Uddhav Thackeray said that he had sacrificed too much during Lok Sabha, and that vote transfer had happened in Lok Sabha because of his campaigning, and the Congress had flourished at the cost of the Shiv Sena UBT, and that is why during the Vidhan Sabha it was payback time, and so the Congress should adjust. This did not go down well with the leadership. In fact, the state president of the Congress was in line of fire because of the strong stance he took, saying that the Congress should have ideally got those many seats. Though the Congress tried to downplay that difference, it did reflect in the morale, it did reflect in the way things worked out on the ground as well. So these are the two strong examples that come to my mind, offhand. One was about Sajjad Nomani, and the other was about seat distribution talks, particularly in Vidarbha, which really put off so many things within the Mahavikas Aghadi, particularly between the Congress and Shiv Sena Uddhav Thackeray group.
Right. I mean, so much so far as the political analysis is concerned. Now, I mean, we've seen the reaction of the MVA parties to the election results, and I mean, all of them have raised concerns about the way EVMs have been handled. The lack of transparency from the election commission to their questions. They have flagged a number of issues. One, the turnout. The voter turnout figures which are put out on the website live, they were like 58% at 5 p.m. on polling day, and then it increases by 11:30 p.m. to 65%, and then before counting time it increases further to 66%, and 8%. We know that voter turnouts figures, percentages tend to increase from the time of counting closure. I mean, from the time of voting being closed to the final tally, but usually it's within 1% or 2%. This 8% surge is something which has been flagged. And secondly, I think in a podcast, another commentator has pointed out that whenever the vote surges are higher, more than 3 to 5%, it tends to benefit the NDA parties, and whenever it is within 1%, it benefits the India parties. What is the explanation for this? And there are also like 76 lakh votes which have come in after 5 p.m. You know, so these kinds of discrepancies have elicited no explanation from the election commission, and we are just sort of left to speculate on our own. So, how do you think this is reflected on the ground? Is it just the political parties cribbing about their losses, or do the people who actually went out and voted, do they also empathize with these kinds of sentiments? What is your observation?
Well, let me tell you two things. Firstly, as much as I'm going out and talking to people, there seems to be a sense of disbelief in certain sections of the society about the result that we have seen. Having said that, just 15 minutes ago, or half an hour ago, I have walked out of a meeting with the chief electoral officer of Maharashtra, and I raised the same issues because in the last 3 days we have seen all these doubts being raised by the opposition parties here with respect to the rise in voting percentage, with respect to the surge in voting, particularly after 5 p.m. And what is the logical explanation to all these things? I was told by the chief electoral officer just a while ago that while in and semi-urban areas, they saw that people did come out to vote in large numbers after the office timings, which means from 5 to 6, there was a considerable surge in the number of voters. And though, the voting booth shuts down at 6, whoever is at the booth till 6 p.m. gets to vote, even if it gets late. And what the election commission told me just a while ago was that on the day when the counting gets done, when the voting gets done, Form 17C is given to each candidate, which shows what were the total number of voters who had come. And such forms were given to each candidate at the very same time. So it negated the possibility of any foul play with respect to the number of voters, whether there was any manipulation about how suddenly so many voters came within the last 1 hour or so. Going back to the Lokniti CSDS survey, it says that there was a higher voting percentage in the second half of the day, and that was primarily attributed to several organizations and local workers going out and asking people to come out, making sure that people came out in large numbers and voted. Now, this can be explained a bit with respect to how, within Mahayuti, within Mahavikas Aghadi as well, the role of RSS has been speculated. So while Sanjay Raut said just 2 days ago that it was the RSS which worked and which did not help us, it went against us. The BJP sources also indicated that the RSS did have a role in making sure that people, like going door to door and making sure that people came out of their houses and voted. If you look at the data of Maharashtra has seen similar sudden surges in voting percentages sometimes in the past as well. So, with respect to the doubts that are being raised, I cannot, you know, have a comment about whether there was any foul play involved, whether there is a lot of answering that the election commission also needs to do, because in a democracy, if the voters have apprehensions about the results, a section of the voters have apprehensions, the candidates have apprehensions about the result. In a free and fair electoral democracy, all these things should be clarified. These are the initial reports that we have now, depending on the kind of doubts. For example, yesterday yesterday I was speaking to a leader from NCP SP party, and he raised several doubts with respect to all these things, with respect to Form 20, with respect to how the voting, the margins of victory for certain candidates were similar in some districts. Now, all these things are issues that one will have to go into, that will have to be presented in front of the election commission, that election commission will have to answer.
There are also issues of mismatch between votes polled and votes counted, like 5 lakh votes more have been counted than the number of votes polled.
Well, there was a report in one of the agencies with respect to this. Uh, you know, there is no clarity on that as yet, because there is no official reply on how that could have happened, and there is no information right now to say whether there is any explanation to this kind of information that is coming ahead right now.
Right. I mean, lack of adequate information and lack of transparency is not helping the cause of the election commission. I mean, we all want to believe the election commission is doing a fair and credible job, but then election commission has to give us information with which to defend the election commission. Anyway, one last question, Vinaya, before I let you go. We're running out of time. So now that all this is been done with regard to the electoral side of things, where do we stand with regard to the selection of the chief minister and cabinet formation? What are things? Is it going to be like a BJP chief minister for the entire tenure, or are we looking at the Bihar model as one of their constituents suggested? What do you see going on right now?
It looks unlikely as of now that BJP will relent for a Bihar model in Maharashtra, simply because the BJP cadres feel that they've sacrificed too much till now, despite being the single largest party. Even in the 2019 elections, initially they had to sit in opposition. They say with the kind of change of government and the splitting of parties and the complete chaos and mess that Maharashtra politics saw 2.5 years ago, in which BJP also had a role to play, but they still thereafter claimed that they still did not take the chief minister's position even after Eknath Shinde first and then Ajit Pawar became a part of the equation. So they say that too much has been sacrificed in this game of power. And this time, when the BJP has got a brutal majority by itself, forget the alliance, forget Mahayuti, by itself, the BJP is over 132 or 133. If we count the support of the independents, then that number goes ahead further, which means just a few seats here and there, and they are in a position where they can themselves form a government. They are in that kind of a strong position. At this juncture, they do not seem to be willing to adjust on the chief minister's position. So, from all the signals that we are getting from within the political circles right now, it seems like the formula will continue, that there will be one chief minister and two deputy chief ministers, and it will likely be a BJP chief minister for the entire term of 5 years. But there will be clarity by tonight when the leaders of the Mahayuti meet Amit Shah, and after that meeting, the top leadership takes a call on that. But as far as the signals that we are getting, decks seem to be cleared for the BJP chief minister here, and for one chief minister and two deputy chief ministers. And thereafter, the cabinet portfolio distribution can go on, really. That is not such a big issue. That might take some time, because each party will try and adjust its own caste combinations, will try and placate everyone who was upset during the last time. So those combinations might take some time to work out. So we may not see the full cabinet swearing in this time. Whenever within the next 2, 3 days, 4 days, we expect that the swearing in ceremony should happen on the 2nd of December. But whenever it does happen, we may not see the full cabinet swearing in. A part of it might be sworn in along with the chief minister and the deputy chief ministers.
Right. I mean, very quickly, what next for the constituents of the MVA? I mean, what are they going to be doing? Is it going to have a bearing on the India bloc going forward? Are they? I mean, how do they view their defeat? First of all, have they accepted that they've lost, or do they believe that it's basically it was a stolen election? What is the thinking among the MVA leadership? Are they blaming each other? Are they introspecting on what they could have done differently? Have they accepted the kind of results they've got? What is the sense you're getting?
Well, there's still a sense of disbelief and shock within the MVA. within the Congress, particularly so, because clearly the way things were in Lok Sabha elections, Congress seemed to be gaining well on the ground as well. And nobody had anticipated such terrible numbers for them or for all the three parties of the Mahavikas Aghadi. So they are still in a sense of disbelief, in a sense of shock. And while the blame game hasn't yet started, at a great scale, we are already hearing murmurs from within the Shiv Sena UBT group, where the leaders are requesting Uddhav Thackeray to step out of MVA because the Congress hasn't really helped their image. The vote transfer hasn't happened. So, how things will fall. See, with respect to Sharad Pawar has always been with Congress. So, if that equation continues, that shouldn't come as a surprise. But if Uddhav Thackeray falls out of the equation, one will have to wait and watch as to how that progresses. But I think then in that case, the disintegration of that bloc will be imminent because it was anyway an unnatural alliance. Nothing much can be said with respect to political situation in Maharashtra, because if you look at both the sides, they have unnatural allies there. One side has been able to work its own things well, the other side doesn't seem to. So I wouldn't place my bets in Maharashtra politics with the kind of uncertainties that we have seen and weird developments that we have seen and strange bedfellows who have made it work and who do not seem to be working well at present. So I wouldn't really place my bets on anything. But yes, the Mahavikas Aghadi doesn't look like an integrated, consolidated opposition force right now. There is a likelihood that might disintegrate.
Right. I mean, as you said, unnatural alliances on both sides, but the difference is that on one side the unnatural alliance won, on the other side the unnatural alliance lost, and losers don't have many friends, and it does create further fractures. So we'll have to wait and watch how that unfolds. Thank you so much, Vinaya, for joining us. Very insightful, very granular observations. Pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
In Focus will be back soon with analysis of the biggest news issues. In the meantime, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other platforms. Just search for In Focus by The Hindu. We'll see you soon.